She dropped to her knees in the frozen mud her children clutched against her chest as the auctioneer's gavel rose one final time. Her 8-year-old son was about to be sold to the mines. Her little girl screamed for Mama. And then, through the blinding snow, a stranger's voice cut through the chaos, 5 words that would change everything. This is the story of Sarah Whitmore, a mother who lost it all, and the cowboy who gave her something she never expected a reason to hope again. Stay with me until the end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The snow came down like a curse from heaven, thick and mean and cold enough to freeze the tears on a mother's face before they could fall. Sarah Ellen Whitmore couldn't feel her fingers anymore. Couldn't feel her toes. The thin calico dress she wore, the only dress she owned, now did nothing against the bitter wind that cut through Silver Creek's town square like a knife. But she could feel her children. That's all that mattered. Will pressed against her left side, his 8-year-old body rigid with a fury too big for his small frame. Abby clung to her right hand, her little fingers turning blue despite Sarah's attempts to keep them warm. And Sammy, sweet silent. Sammy sat on her hip with his wooden horse clutched against his chest, his face buried in her neck. "Mama!" Abby's teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. "Mama, I'm cold. I know, baby, I know." Sarah pulled her daughter closer, but there was no warmth left to give. She'd given it all away months ago, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but bone and desperation, and the fierce, terrible love that kept her standing when everything else had crumbled. The auction platform was rough pine, hastily constructed, already slick with ice. Around them, the townspeople of Silver Creek had gathered, despite the storm. 50, maybe 60 people, their faces hard and curious and hungry for spectacle. Sarah recognized some of them. Mrs. Patterson, who used to buy eggs from her farm before Thomas gambled it away. The Hendersons, who'd sat 3 pews behind them in church. Old Mr. Cooper, who'd bounced Will on his knee when the boy was just a baby. None of them would meet her eyes now. "Quite a crowd for this weather," the auctioneer muttered to his assistant. "Harlan must have spread the word." Sarah's blood went cold at the name. Victor Harlan. The man who'd been circling her family like a vulture for months, ever since Thomas died, and left nothing behind but debts and shame. "All right, folks." The auctioneer, a florid man named Silas Cutter, with tobacco juice staining his beard, stepped forward and banged his gavel against the podium. "Let's get this done before we all freeze to death. Got ourselves a widow woman here, name of Sarah Whitmore, 28 years old, good health, can cook, clean, sew, and," he consulted his papers, "can read and write. That's something special, folks." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah felt their eyes crawling over her, assessing her like livestock at a cattle sale. 3 children, Cutter continued. Boy of 8, girl of 5, boy of 3. We'll be selling them separate to maximize... No. The word tore from Sarah's throat before she could stop it. She stepped forward, putting herself between the auctioneer and her children. "Please, please, you can't separate us. They're just babies. They need their mother. Please, I'm begging you." "Ma'am." Cutter's voice carried a warning. "We've been through this. The law is clear. Your husband's debts." "My husband was a drunk and a gambler." Sarah's voice cracked, but she didn't care anymore. "Let them hear. Let them all hear. He lied to me. He stole from me. He died in a ditch with another woman's name on his lips and left us nothing but shame. I didn't sign those papers. I didn't make those bets. Why should my children pay for his sins?" Silence. Then from somewhere in the crowd, a woman's voice. "Shameless. Talking about her dead husband that way. Should have kept him in line," another voice added. "A good wife would have known." Sarah wanted to scream. A good wife. She'd tried. God knows she'd tried. She'd hidden the whiskey bottles and begged Thomas to stop. She'd lied to the creditors and pawned her mother's ring and worked her fingers bloody trying to keep food on the table. And still, she'd lost everything. "Mama." Will's hand found hers, squeezing tight. His voice was low, steady, far too grown up for a boy his age. "Don't let them see you break. That's what they want." Sarah looked down at her son, at his father's green eyes, staring up at her with a determination that made her heart crack. When had he become this? When had her little boy learned to be so hard? "I won't break," she whispered. "Not while I'm breathing." Touching. A new voice, smooth and cold as river ice. Truly touching. The crowd parted, and Victor Harlan stepped through. He was tall and well-fed, his expensive coat brushed clean despite the falling snow. Gold watch chain glinting at his vest. Kid leather gloves on his hands. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, and a casual cruelty that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Mr. Harlan." Cutter's entire demeanor changed, becoming almost fawning. "Sir, I didn't expect you to come out in this weather." "And miss this." Harlan smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. "I wouldn't dream of it." He climbed onto the platform, and Sarah instinctively stepped back, pulling her children with her. Harlan's gaze swept over them, slowly lingering on Will, in a way that made Sarah want to claw his eyes out. "The boy," Harlan said. "He looks strong for his age. How old?" "8, sir." "8." Harlan nodded thoughtfully. "Perfect. I need boys for the lower shafts. The ones that are too small for grown men. He'll do nicely." "No." Sarah's voice came out as a growl. "You're not taking my son." Harlan raised an eyebrow, amused. "Mrs. Whitmore, you seem to be laboring under a misunderstanding. You don't have a say in this matter. Your husband owed me $312. You can't pay. Therefore, you and your assets belong to me." "They're not assets. They're children." "Same thing in the eyes of the law." Harlan turned to Cutter. $200 for the boy. Cash. I'll collect him now." "No!" Will lunged forward, his small fists swinging. "I won't go! You can't make me! I'll fight you! I'll—" Harlan caught his wrist with casual ease and twisted. Will cried out in pain, dropping to his knees. "Will—" Sarah threw herself at Harlan, clawing at his arm. "Let him go! Let him go, you monster!" Harlan shoved her back with his free hand, and she stumbled, nearly falling. Only her grip on Sammy kept her upright. "Mama!" Abby screamed. "Mama, get up, Mama!" "Sheriff." Harlan's voice was bored. "Control these animals." Sheriff Dawson, a thick-necked man with mean eyes, stepped onto the platform and grabbed Sarah's arm, wrenching it behind her back. She gasped in pain, but didn't stop struggling. "Let my son go. Please. Please take me instead. I'll work for you. I'll do anything. Just don't take my babies. Please, I'm begging you." "Begging doesn't become you, Mrs. Whitmore." Harlan tightened his grip on Will's wrist, and the boy whimpered. "Now let's discuss the others. The girl is too young to work, but she'll grow. $5 for her. The infant." "He's not an infant. He's 3 years old." "Does it matter?" Harlan shrugged. "He's useless for labor, but I suppose someone might want him for something. $1. Total for the lot, $206. Sarah felt the world spinning. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. Actually, Harlan paused, his eyes traveling over Sarah in a way that made her stomach turn. "I've changed my mind about the woman. She's not bad looking for a widow. Strong, healthy. She might prove useful." The implication was clear. Several men in the crowd snickered. $400 for all 4 of them, Harlan announced. "Final offer. That more than covers the debt plus your fee, Cutter. Let's conclude this business." Cutter nodded eagerly. "Sold to Mr. Victor Harlan for—" "Wait." The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep, rough, carrying an authority that made people turn their heads. A man pushed through the gathered townspeople. Tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the wind. His coat was worn canvas dusted with snow, his hat pulled low against the storm. But his eyes, gray-blue like thunderclouds, were fixed on the platform with an intensity that stopped Cutter mid-sentence. "Who the hell are you?" Harlan demanded. "Name's Ezra Callahan." The stranger reached the front of the crowd and stopped. His voice was calm, almost lazy, but there was steel underneath. "I don't believe we've met." "Then you know who I am." "I know what you are." Ezra's gaze moved to Will, still trapped in Harlan's grip, then to Sarah, held by the sheriff, then to Abby and Sammy, clinging to each other at the edge of the platform. "I know exactly what you are." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Whatever you're selling, stranger, I'm not buying. This is a private transaction." "Looks like a public auction to me." Ezra climbed onto the platform in one easy motion, and suddenly the space felt smaller, the air thicker. "And last I checked, anyone can bid at a public auction." "You want to bid?" Harlan laughed. "On what? The woman? She's mine, stranger. Everything here is mine." "Not yet it isn't." Ezra turned to Cutter. "What's the total debt?" Cutter glanced nervously at Harlan. I don't... "The debt?" Ezra repeated, his voice hardening. "How much?" $412, Cutter stammered. "Plus my fee. Call it $450. And Harlan bid $400. "Yes, but..." Ezra reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He upended it onto the podium, and gold coins spilled across the wood with a sound like bells ringing. $600, he said. "For the woman and all 3 children. They stay together." The crowd gasped. Harlan's face went purple with rage. "You can't do this. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I'm dealing with a man who buys children for his mines and treats women like property." Ezra's voice was quiet, but it carried. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." "Sheriff?" Dawson took a step toward Ezra, then stopped. Something in the stranger's eyes, something cold and certain and utterly unafraid, made him reconsider. "Let go of the boy," Ezra said to Harlan. "It wasn't a request." "Or what?" Ezra's hand moved to his belt, resting on the worn grip of his pistol. He didn't draw it. He didn't need to. "Let go of the boy." For a long moment, no one moved. Snow fell silently around them, coating shoulders and hats, and the platform's rough boards. The only sound was the wind howling through the square like a lost soul. Then Harlan released Will's wrist. The boy stumbled back, rubbing his arm, his eyes never leaving the stranger's face. "This isn't over," Harlan hissed. "You've made a powerful enemy today, Callahan." "I've had enemies before." Ezra's voice didn't waver. "Still here. You'll regret this." "Maybe, but not today." He turned to Cutter. "You got my money. Give me the papers and let's be done with this." Cutter's hands shook as he shuffled through his documents. Sarah watched in disbelief as signatures were applied, seals pressed, official papers transferred from one man to another. The sheriff released her arm and she stumbled forward, gathering her children close. Will, Abby, Sammy, all of them. Still together, still hers. "Ma'am?" She looked up to find Ezra standing before her, his hat in his hands. Up close, she could see the weariness in his face, the old pain in his eyes. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. These were the marks of a man who'd survived things. Terrible things. "I got a wagon outside," he said quietly. "It's warm and dry and there's food. Let me take you somewhere safe." "Why?" The words scraped out of Sarah's throat. "Why would you do this? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." Ezra was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "My mama was sold on a platform just like this one. I was 8 years old, same as your boy. They dragged her away from me screaming, and I never saw her again." Sarah felt tears freeze on her cheeks. "So when I see a family about to be torn apart," Ezra continued, "I do something about it. Because nobody did anything for me." He put his hat back on, pulling it low. "Now come on, before we all freeze to death." He led them through the crowd, which parted silently before him. Sarah clutched Sammy tight against her chest, her other hand gripping Abby's frozen fingers. Will walked beside her, his eyes darting between Ezra's back and the crowd watching for threats. The wagon waited at the edge of the square, sturdy canvas covered with two strong horses stamping impatiently in the snow. Ezra helped them inside, his hands surprisingly gentle as he lifted the children onto the blanket-covered bed. "There's a brazier," he said, pointing to a small iron box. "I'll light it once we're moving. Should warm up quick." Sarah settled onto the blankets, pulling all three children into her lap. Her arms ached, her back screamed, but she held on because letting go was not an option. "Mama?" Will's voice was barely a whisper. "Is it really over?" Through the canvas opening, Sarah could see Victor Harlan standing in the square watching them leave. Snow settled on his shoulders, his hat, his expensive coat. But his eyes burned with a cold, patient fury that made her blood run cold. "I don't know, baby." She pressed a kiss to her son's hair. "I don't know." The wagon lurched into motion, carrying them away from the square, away from the watching eyes, away from the man who'd tried to buy her children like cattle. But even as Silver Creek disappeared behind them, swallowed by the storm, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Victor Harlan was not a man who accepted defeat, and whatever came next, she knew in her bones would be far worse than anything she'd survived before. The wagon creaked and groaned as it climbed the frozen trail, fighting against drifts that reached nearly to the axles. Inside, Sarah huddled with her children beneath every blanket Ezra had provided, their breath forming small clouds in the cramped space. The brazier glowed orange, throwing flickering shadows across the canvas walls. It wasn't enough to banish the cold entirely, but it kept the worst of it at bay. "How long?" Will asked, his voice muffled against Sarah's shoulder. "Until we get where we're going." "About 3 hours," Sarah said. "If the storm doesn't get worse." 3 hours. Will was quiet for a moment. "That's a long time." "We can handle it." "I know." But his voice wavered just slightly, and Sarah pulled him closer. Abby had fallen asleep against her other side, her small body finally relaxing after hours of tension. Sammy was awake, though his dark eyes, Thomas's eyes, God help her, fixed on the canvas flap that separated them from the driver's seat. "Mama." His voice was barely a whisper. "Who's that man? His name is Ezra." Sarah smoothed Sammy's hair back from his forehead. "He's going to help us." "Is he a good man?" Sarah hesitated. How could she answer that? She'd thought Thomas was a good man once before the drinking and the gambling and the lies. She'd trusted him, and look where that had gotten them. "I think so," she said finally. "I hope so." "Hope isn't enough." Will's voice was hard. "Papa said he'd take care of us too. Papa said lots of things." "I know, baby. I hate him." The words came out fierce, trembling. "I hate him for dying. I hate him for leaving us. I hate him for—" Will's voice broke. "For making you cry all the time. For making everything bad." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Will, it's true. Don't tell me it isn't true." Will pulled back to look at her, his green eyes. Thomas's eyes. Why did they all have Thomas's eyes burning with a fury that made her heart ache? "He ruined everything, Mama. Everything. And now we've got to trust some stranger because there's nobody else. Because Papa didn't leave us anybody else." "I know." Sarah cupped her son's face in her hands. "I know, baby. I'm angry too. I'm so angry sometimes I can't breathe. But we're still here. We're still together. And that's worth something, isn't it?" Will's lower lip trembled. For just a moment, he looked like the little boy he was supposed to be, instead of the tiny man he'd been forced to become. "I wanted him to be different," Will whispered. "I prayed every night for him to stop drinking, to stop gambling, to just be our papa again. But he never did." I know, baby. I prayed too. God didn't listen. Maybe he did. Sarah pulled Will close, tucking his head under her chin. Maybe this is his answer. Maybe Ezra is supposed to help us. Or maybe he's just another man who'll hurt us. Maybe. Sarah couldn't lie to her son. Not anymore. But right now, he's all we've got. So we'll be careful, and we'll watch, and we'll protect each other. That's what we do, right? That's what we do. Will's voice was muffled against her dress. You and me and Abby and Sammy, nobody else. Nobody else. The wagon lurched over a hidden rut, and Abby stirred her eyes fluttering open. Mama, are we there yet? Not yet, sweet girl. Go back to sleep. I can't. Abby sat up, rubbing her eyes. I'm too cold. And hungry. Mama, I'm so hungry. Sarah's stomach clenched. They hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, a thin gruel that the boarding house owner had grudgingly provided before throwing them out, before the sheriff came to collect them for the auction. I know, baby. I know. When we get to Mr. Callahan's ranch, we'll eat. I promise. Real food like bread and butter. I hope so. And meat. Abby's eyes went wide. Real meat, Mama. We'll see. The canvas flap rustled, and suddenly Ezra's face appeared in the opening. Snow clung to his eyebrows, his beard the brim of his hat. His cheeks were raw from the wind. We're about an hour out, he said, his voice raised to be heard over the storm. The trail's getting worse, but the horses know the way. We'll make it. Thank you, Sarah said. It seemed inadequate, but what else was there? Ezra nodded, then his eyes fell on the children huddled together in their thin clothes, shivering despite the blankets. Something flickered across his face. Pain maybe, or memory. There's food in that pack, he said, gesturing to a leather satchel near the front of the wagon. Jerky and hardtack and some dried apples. It's not much, but it'll fill your bellies until we get home. Abby gasped. Food. Real food. Real food. Was that the ghost of a smile on Ezra's weathered face? Help yourselves. He disappeared back through the flap, and Sarah heard him clicking to the horses, urging them on through the drifts. She reached for the pack with trembling hands. The jerky was tough and salty, the hardtack hard enough to crack a tooth, the dried apples chewy and sweet. But to Sarah and her children, starving and frozen and terrified, it was the finest meal they'd ever tasted. Mama. Will spoke with his mouth full, forgetting his manners for once. This is good. Don't talk with your mouth full. Sorry. He swallowed, then grinned, actually grinned for the first time in months. But it's really good. It is. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something close. It really is. They ate in silence after that, passing the food between them, making sure everyone got their share. Even Sammy, who usually had to be coaxed to eat anything, gnawed happily on a strip of jerky, his wooden horse temporarily forgotten. By the time they finished, the wagon was slowing down. Sarah pushed aside the canvas flap and peered out into the storm, and caught her breath. Through the swirling snow, she could make out the shape of buildings, a large house 2 stories with light glowing in the windows, a barn massive and solid, several smaller structures scattered around the yard, and beyond them, fading into white, the ghostly shapes of fences stretching toward the horizon. Is that it? Will had crawled up beside her, his eyes wide. Is that where we're going to live? I think so. It's big. Yes. Bigger than our old house. Sarah didn't answer. Their old house, the one Thomas had gambled away, had been modest but cozy, filled with the warmth of better days. This place was different. Larger. Colder somehow, despite the lights in the windows. But it was shelter. It was safety. It was a chance to start over. And right now that was enough. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the main house, and Ezra appeared at the back, lowering the tailgate. Snow swirled around him, coating his shoulders, his hat, his beard. Welcome to Callahan Ranch, he said. His voice was gruff, almost awkward. "It ain't much to look at right now, but it's warm and dry. Let's get you inside." He helped Sarah down first, then reached for the children. Will hesitated, that wary look back in his eyes, but he allowed Ezra to lift him from the wagon. Abby went eagerly, too cold and tired to be suspicious. And Sammy sweet silent. Sammy reached for Ezra with both arms, his wooden horse dangling from one small fist. Ezra froze. For just a moment, something cracked in his careful expression. Pain. Longing. An old grief so raw it made Sarah's heart ache. Then he took Sammy in his arms, settling the boy against his hip with a practiced ease that surprised her, and headed for the house. "Come on," he called over his shoulder, "before the storm gets worse." Sarah gathered Will and Abby and followed him through the snow toward the light, toward whatever came next. The door opened before they reached it, and an older man appeared, gray-haired, weathered, with kind eyes and a worried frown. "Ezra." "Thank God. I was about to send the boys out looking for—" He stopped, his eyes widening as he took in Sarah and the children. "Well now, what's all this—" "Long story, Dutch." Ezra stepped inside, still carrying Sammy. "Get some coffee on, and see if there's any of that stew left from supper." "Stew?" Dutch's eyebrows rose. "Ezra, what happened in town? I thought you were just getting supplies." Plans changed. Ezra set Sammy down gently, then turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Dutch Brennan. He's my foreman, been with the ranch since my father's time. Dutch, this is Sarah Whitmore and her children. They're going to be staying with us for a while." "Staying?" Dutch looked between Ezra and Sarah, clearly trying to piece together the story. Then he seemed to decide it could wait. "Well, come in, come in. Let's get you warmed up. Those little ones look frozen half to death." He ushered them toward the fireplace, where a massive blaze crackled and roared. Sarah felt the heat wash over her like a benediction, warming her frozen skin, her aching bones, her exhausted soul. "Sit, sit." Dutch pulled chairs close to the fire. "I'll get that coffee, and the stew. Ezra, you want to explain what's going on?" Later. Ezra was already heading for the door. "I need to see to the horses. In this storm. They got us here safe. Least I can do is make sure they're fed and warm." He paused at the door, looking back at Sarah. "Dutch will take care of you. Get some food in you. Rest. We'll talk in the morning." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a bang. Dutch shook his head, a fond exasperation in his eyes. "That man always was better with horses than people." He turned to Sarah with a kind smile. "Now then, Mrs. Whitmore, let's get you and those babies settled. You look like you've been through hell and back." "I have," Sarah said quietly. "We all have." "Well, you're safe now." Dutch patted her shoulder with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. "Whatever happened out there, whatever brought you here, you're safe now. Ezra's a good man, the best man I know. He'll see you right." Sarah wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But as she sat by the fire, watching her children eat their first real meal in days, she couldn't shake the image of Victor Harlan standing in the snow, watching them leave. And the look in his eyes that promised this wasn't over. Not even close. The fire crackled and popped, sending shadows dancing across the walls as Sarah finished the last of her stew. The bowl had been filled twice, Dutch insisted, and now her stomach was fuller than it had been in weeks. Months, maybe. The children had fallen asleep in a pile near the hearth, tangled together like puppies seeking warmth. Will's arm was thrown protectively across Abby, and Sammy lay curled between them, his wooden horse still clutched in his fist. Sarah couldn't stop staring at them. They were safe. Fed. Warm. For the first time since Thomas died, they were actually safe. More coffee. She looked up to find Dutch standing beside her, pot in hand. His weathered face was kind, patient. He hadn't pushed for explanations, hadn't demanded answers. Just kept the fire stoked and the food coming. "Thank you." Sarah held out her cup. For everything. You've been so kind and you don't even know us. Don't need to know you to see you needed help. Dutch poured the coffee, then settled into the chair across from her. Besides, Ezra don't bring people home without good reason. Man's got instincts about folk. Always has. What kind of instincts? The kind that come from hard living. Dutch's eyes drifted to the fire. He ever tell you about his mama? He mentioned she was sold when he was 8. 8 years old. Dutch shook his head slowly. Same age as your boy there. Watched them drag her away screaming. His daddy tried to stop it, got beaten half to death for his trouble. Died a few months later. Broken heart, the doc said, but I reckon it was more than that. Man just gave up living. Sarah's throat tightened. And Ezra? Raised himself mostly. Did odd jobs, worked. Ranches, learned horses from an old Cherokee fella who took pity on him. Saved every penny. Built this place from nothing. Dutch's voice softened with pride. He's rough around the edges, I won't lie. Don't know much about talking or feelings or any of that, but there ain't a better man in the territory. Not one. Why are you telling me this? Dutch met her eyes. Because I saw the way you looked at him, like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, like you're expecting him to turn out to be just like whoever hurt you before. Sarah stiffened. I don't. It's all right. Dutch held up a hand. You got every right to be cautious, every right to protect those babies. But I want you to know Ezra ain't going to hurt you. Ain't going to hurt them. He'd cut off his own arm first. The door banged open, and Ezra stomped in, bringing a swirl of snow and cold air with him. He'd been outside for over an hour, seeing to the horses, and his face was raw from the wind. Storm's getting worse, he said, shaking snow from his coat. We won't be going anywhere for a few days. The cabin ready? Dutch asked. Good enough. Fixed the window last week, and there's wood stacked by the stove. Ezra's eyes moved to the sleeping children, and that strange softness flickered across his face again. They out. Dead to the world. Dutch rose, stretching his back. I'll leave you two to talk. Mrs. Whitmore, it's been a pleasure. Anything you need, you just holler. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Dutch, just Dutch. He smiled, tipped an invisible hat, and disappeared through a door at the back of the house. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Sarah watched Ezra move around the room, hanging his coat, pulling off his boots, pouring himself coffee. His movements were economical, practiced like a man who'd spent most of his life alone. You should get some sleep, he said finally, not looking at her. It's been a long day. I can't. Sarah's hands tightened around her cup. I keep thinking about what happens next. What you expect from us. What this arrangement actually means. Ezra was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the room and sat in the chair Dutch had vacated, stretching his long legs toward the fire. It means you work for me, he said. Cooking, cleaning, managing the household. The place has been falling apart since Mrs. Henderson died. I ain't good at that kind of thing. Never was. And my children? They're children. They'll do chores same as any ranch kid. But they'll also go to school when the weather allows. Learn to read proper, do their numbers. I'll teach the boy about horses if he wants. The little ones can help in the garden come spring. He paused. They'll have time to play, to be kids. That's important. Sarah stared at him. You're paying off a $400 debt. And in return you want me to keep house? And cook. Your cooking's got to be better than mine. Dutch won't say it, but I know he's tired of eating charred meat and raw beans. A surprised laugh escaped her. That's really all you want. Ezra's jaw tightened. Mrs. Whitmore, I ain't sure what kind of men you've known in your life, but I don't want... He stopped, started again. I don't expect... Another pause. Hell. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely uncomfortable. I ain't looking for a wife, he said bluntly. Ain't looking for anything like that. You got your own cabin, your own space, your own door with a lock on it. What I want is help running this ranch. That's all. Nothing more." Sarah searched his face for any sign of deception, any hint that this was too good to be true. All she saw was a man who didn't quite know what to do with his hands. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why go through all this trouble? Why spend all that money? You could have walked past that auction and never looked back." Ezra was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "When they took my mama, there was a man in the crowd. Rich man. Could have bought her easy. Could have kept us together." "What happened?" "He walked away." Ezra's eyes were distant, fixed on something only he could see. "Just turned around and walked away. Like we weren't worth the trouble." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I swore that day," Ezra continued, "if I ever got the means to help someone, if I ever had the power to stop a family from being torn apart, I'd do it, no matter the cost." He finally met her eyes. "You and your children needed help. I had the means. Simple as that." "It's not simple," Sarah whispered. "Nothing about this is simple." "No, I reckon it's not." Ezra rose, suddenly restless. "But it's done. You're here. Those children are safe. The rest we'll figure out as we go." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's a cabin about 50 yards from the house. That's where you'll stay. Dutch had the boys stock it with supplies. Blankets, food, everything you need. I'll show you in the morning when the storm lets up." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. "For everything." Ezra nodded once, then disappeared through the door, leaving her alone with her sleeping children and the dying fire. Sarah sat for a long time watching the flames burn down to embers, thinking about everything that had happened. The auction, Harlan's cruel hands on her son, the stranger who'd appeared from nowhere and changed everything. She didn't trust Ezra Callahan. Didn't know if she could. Trust had been beaten out of her over years of broken promises and shattered hopes. But she wanted to. God help her, she wanted to. The next 3 days passed in a blur of snow and settling in. The storm raged without mercy, piling drifts against the cabin walls and making any travel impossible. But inside, Sarah and her children were warm-fed and slowly beginning to believe they might actually be safe. The cabin was small, but solid, one main room with a cast-iron stove, a large bed, a table with 4 chairs, and a trunk at the foot of the bed. Someone Dutch most likely had stocked the shelves with supplies, flour, sugar, coffee, salt, pork, beans, and even a precious jar of honey that made Abby's eyes go wide. "Is this all for us?" she asked, standing on tiptoe to peer at the shelves. "All of it. All of it," Sarah confirmed. "But we need to make it last, sweet girl. We don't know when we can get more." "I'll be careful," Abby promised solemnly. "I won't eat too much. I'll make it last forever and ever." Will, predictably, was more suspicious. "He's trying to buy us," he said on the second day, watching through the window as Ezra crossed the yard toward the barn. "That's what men like him do. They give you nice things, make you feel safe, and then—" "And then what?" Sarah asked quietly. Will's jaw tightened. "And then they show you who they really are. Your father did that, I know, but not all men are like your father, Will." "How do you know?" Her son's eyes were fierce, challenging. "How do you know he won't turn out exactly the same?" "I don't." Sarah pulled him close, even though he resisted at first. "I don't know anything for certain, but I know we didn't have a choice, Will. It was this or Harlan's mines. It was this or watching them sell Abby and Sammy to strangers. Sometimes you have to take a chance on people, even when you're scared." "I'm not scared?" "Yes, you are. And that's okay. I'm scared too." Sarah kissed the top of his head. "But we'll be scared together. And we'll watch out for each other. That's what we do, right?" Will was quiet for a moment. Then grudgingly, "That's what we do." On the third day, the storm finally broke. Sarah woke to silence, real silence without the constant howl of wind and pale morning light streaming through the frost-covered window. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, catching her breath at the transformation. The world had turned to white, pristine and glittering, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Snow covered everything, the buildings, the fences, the distant hills, like a fresh start. A clean slate. Morning. She turned to find Ezra approaching from the barn, his boots crunching through the snow. He looked different in the daylight, less intimidating, more human. Tired, she realized. Like a man who hadn't slept well in a long time. "Morning," she replied. "The storm's passed." "For now. Another one's coming in a few days according to Dutch. We've got a small window to get supplies and check the stock." He stopped a few feet away, hands shoved in his pockets. "How are you settling in?" "Well enough. The children are still asleep." "Good. Kids need sleep." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with small talk. "I wanted to show you the main house today. Where things are. What needs doing. If you're up for it." "I am." They walked together across the yard, their breath fogging in the cold air. Sarah found herself studying Ezra's profile, the strong jaw, the old scars, the way he carried himself like a man expecting trouble. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask, might not answer." "Victor Harlan. You didn't seem surprised by him, like you'd seen his type before." Ezra's expression hardened. "There's a Victor Harlan in every town. Men who think money gives them the right to own people, to use them up and throw them away." He was quiet for a moment. "The man who bought my mama was like that. Used her until she wasn't useful anymore, then sold her again. I was 15 before I finally tracked her down." Sarah's heart clenched. "Did you find her?" "I found her grave." Ezra's voice was flat, emotionless. "She'd been dead 2 years by then. Worked to death, they said. Nobody even remembered her name." "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago. But his hands had clenched into fists, and Sarah could see the old rage simmering just beneath the surface. "Point is, I know men like Harlan, know what they're capable of, and I know he's not going to let this go." "What do you mean?" Ezra stopped walking and turned to face her. "I mean he's coming, Mrs. Whitmore. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but he's coming. Men like that don't accept defeat, they don't forgive, and they sure as hell don't forget." Fear coiled in Sarah's stomach. "What should I do?" "Stay close to the house. Don't go anywhere alone. And if you see anyone, you don't recognize anyone at all, you come find me or Dutch immediately. Understand?" Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "Good." Ezra started walking again. "Now come on. Let me show you around before the children wake up." The main house was larger than Sarah had realized, 2 stories with multiple bedrooms upstairs, and a large kitchen, dining room, and parlor below. But it was also in desperate need of care. Dust covered every surface. The windows were grimy. The kitchen showed signs of meals hastily prepared and never properly cleaned up. "Like I said," Ezra muttered, following her gaze. "I ain't good at this kind of thing." "It's not so bad." Sarah ran a finger along the mantel, leaving a trail in the dust. "Nothing that can't be fixed with some hard work and soap." "You think so?" "I know so." She turned to face him. "I've spent my whole life cleaning up messes, Mr. Callahan. This is nothing compared to what I've dealt with before." Something flickered in Ezra's eyes. Respect, maybe. Or gratitude. "Ezra," he said. "If we're going to be working together, you might as well call me Ezra." "All right, Ezra." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Then you should call me Sarah." "Sarah." He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "All right." They stood there for a moment, an oddly comfortable silence stretching between them. Then Ezra cleared his throat and looked away. "I should check on the horses. Dutch will be around if you need anything." He was gone before Sarah could respond, moving with that long, easy stride that ate up the ground. She watched him go, something stirring in her chest that she didn't want to examine too closely. It was too soon, too fast, too dangerous. But as she turned back to the dusty house, already making mental lists of what needed to be done, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. Something important. The days settled into a rhythm after that. Sarah threw herself into work with a determination that bordered on ferocity. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed. She washed windows until the sunlight streamed through unobstructed. She organized the pantry, mended the curtains, and slowly, methodically transformed the neglected house into something that felt like a home. The children adapted in their own ways. Abby claimed a small patch of the frozen garden as her own, already planning what she would plant come spring. Sammy followed Sarah everywhere, his wooden horse always in hand, gradually growing less afraid of the new faces around him. And Will, cautious, angry, protective Will, began spending time with Dutch in the barn. Sarah discovered this on the fourth morning when she went looking for her son and found him helping the old foreman muck out stalls. "He's a natural," Dutch told her later, pride evident in his voice. "Ain't afraid of hard work, that boy. Reminds me of Ezra at that age." "I'm not sure that's a compliment," Sarah said. Dutch laughed. "It is, trust me." That evening, for the first time since Thomas died, Sarah heard Will laugh, really laugh. Not the bitter, sardonic sound he'd adopted over the past months, but a genuine boyish laugh that made her heart ache with relief. He was telling Abby about a horse that had sneezed on Dutch, spraying snot all over the foreman's face, and even Sammy was giggling at the story. Sarah stood in the doorway of the cabin watching her children and felt tears slide down her cheeks. They were going to be okay. Somehow, impossibly, they were going to be okay. A knock at the cabin door made her jump. She wiped her eyes quickly and opened it to find Ezra standing on the porch, hat in hand. "Evening," he said. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Is something wrong?" "No, I just—" He hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to check on you. See how you're settling in." "We're settling in well. Better than well, actually." Sarah stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" Ezra hesitated, then shook his head. "Wouldn't be proper. But He reached into his coat and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for the little girl, Abby. I noticed she's been wearing the same dress every day, and I figured, well, Dutch's sister sent some things a while back, clothes for a daughter she never had, and I thought—" He thrust the package toward Sarah, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him. Sarah took it stunned. "Ezra, that's incredibly kind." "It's nothing, just some old clothes. They were just sitting in a trunk gathering dust." He jammed his hat back on his head. "Anyway, good night." He was gone before she could thank him properly, striding away through the snow like something was chasing him. Sarah stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching him disappear into the darkness. Then she looked down at the package in her hands and felt something shift in her chest. Something warm, something dangerous, something that felt, despite everything she'd been through, terribly like hope. Inside the cabin, Abby squealed with delight at the dresses, 3 of them in different colors, all warm wool and perfect for a Colorado winter. Will watched his sister spin around the small room modeling each one, and for once he didn't say anything suspicious or cynical. "He's not so bad," Will said quietly, standing beside Sarah at the window. "Mr. Callahan, I thought he would be, but he's not." "No." Sarah agreed, her eyes still fixed on the darkness where Ezra had disappeared. "He's not so bad at all." But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was coming. That this peace, this safety, this fragile hope they were building was about to be tested. And somewhere out there beyond the snow-covered hills and the silent prairie, Victor Harlan was waiting. 2 weeks passed, and the rhythm of ranch life settled into Sarah's bones like something she'd always known. She woke before dawn, started the fire, prepared breakfast. The children had their chores. Will in the barn, with Dutch Abby tending to the chickens, Sammy trailing behind his mother like a small shadow. By evening, they gathered in the main house for supper, and Sarah found herself looking forward to those meals more than she wanted to admit. Ezra was there every night, sitting at the head of the table, eating her cooking with an appreciation that made her face warm. He didn't talk much that wasn't his way, but he listened. To Abby's chatter about her chickens, to Will's questions about horses, even to Sammy's babbling, which had increased dramatically since they'd arrived. The boy's coming out of his shell, Dutch observed one evening, watching Sammy show Ezra his wooden horse for the 100th time. Barely said 2 words when you got here. Now he won't shut up. He feels safe, Sarah said quietly. Children know when they're safe. Dutch glanced at her. And you? You feeling safe yet? Sarah didn't answer. She wasn't sure she knew how. The second storm came 3 days later, just as Dutch had predicted. It howled across the prairie like a living thing, piling snow against the buildings, and making the world disappear into white nothing. But this time, Sarah wasn't afraid. She had food, warmth, shelter. She had her children around her. She had Ezra. Not in any romantic way, she wouldn't let herself think like that, but as a presence, a protector, someone who checked on them every day, who made sure they had everything they needed, who looked at her children like they mattered. It was on the 3rd day of the storm that everything changed. Sarah was in the main house, kneading bread dough, when she heard the front door bang open. She looked up expecting Ezra or Dutch and felt her blood turn to ice. Victor Harlan stood in the doorway, snow swirling around him, a cruel smile on his handsome face. Mrs. Whitmore. He stepped inside, brushing snow from his expensive coat. What a pleasure to see you again. Sarah's hands froze in the dough. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. How did you get here? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The storm. I have good horses, good men. Harlan moved further into the room, his eyes sweeping over the clean floors, the organized shelves, the fire crackling in the hearth. You've done well for yourself. The place looks better than I expected. You need to leave. Do I? Harlan settled into one of the chairs by the fire, making himself at home. I don't think so. You see, Mrs. Whitmore, I've been doing some research. Interesting thing about your Mr. Callahan. He's got quite a history. Sarah's throat tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Let me enlighten you. Harlan pulled a folded paper from his coat. Ezra Josiah Callahan, born 1841 in Tennessee. Mother was a freed slave. Father was white trash. Mother sold when the boy was 8. Seems the freedom papers weren't quite legitimate after all. Father died of drink. The boy bounced around various ranches until he landed here. That's not a crime. No, but this is. Harlan's smile widened. In 1865, your Mr. Callahan killed a man. Shot him dead in the street in a town called Redemption, Kansas. Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her. You're lying. Am I? The man he killed was named Silas Crawford, a respected businessman, pillar of the community. Harlan tucked the paper back into his coat. Callahan claimed it was self-defense, said Crawford drew first. But there were no witnesses, and Crawford's family had money, lots of money. Your cowboy barely escaped the noose. If this is true, why isn't he in prison? Because he ran, changed his name, buried himself out here in the middle of nowhere, hoping no one would ever find him. Harlan leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. But I found him, Mrs. Whitmore, and now I'm going to use what I know to take everything he has, including you. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. I'm not yours to take. You will be. Once Callahan's in prison or swinging from a rope, who do you think is going to take over this ranch? Who do you think is going to collect on your debt? Harlan stood, moving toward her. I've already spoken to the territorial marshal. He's very interested in meeting Mr. Callahan. Should be arriving in a few days, weather permitting. Get out. Sarah's voice shook, but she held her ground. Get out of this house. Or what? You'll scream, call for help. Harlan laughed. Your cowboy is out checking the stock. Dutch is in the bunkhouse. By the time anyone gets here, I'll be gone. He reached out and touched her face, and Sarah flinched away. But I wanted you to know what's coming. I wanted you to have time to think about it, to realize that fighting me is pointless. I'll never stop fighting you. We'll see. Harlan moved toward the door. Give my regards to Mr. Callahan. Tell him Victor Harlan always collects what's owed to him. He was gone before Sarah could respond, disappearing into the storm like a ghost. Sarah stood frozen for a long moment, her whole body shaking. Then she ran. She found Ezra in the barn checking on a pregnant mare. He looked up as she burst through the doors, alarm crossing his face. Sarah, what's wrong? Harlan was here. The words tumbled out in a rush. He was in the house. He knows about Kansas, about redemption, about the man you killed. He's bringing a marshal. Ezra, he's going to... Stop. Ezra's voice was calm, but his eyes had gone hard, cold. Slow down. Tell me everything. Sarah told him. Every word Harlan had spoken. Every threat. Every cruel smile. By the time she finished, Ezra's jaw was tight enough to crack. Silas Crawford, he said quietly. I should have known that would come back to haunt me. Is it true? Did you kill him? Ezra was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yes, I killed him. Shot him in the street just like Harlan said. He met her eyes. But it wasn't murder, Sarah. It was justice. I don't understand. Silas Crawford was the man who bought my mother, the man who worked her to death and buried her in an unmarked grave. Ezra's voice was rough with old pain. I spent 10 years looking for him. When I finally found him, I walked into that saloon and told him who I was. Told him what he'd done. He laughed at me. Called my mama a... He stopped, his hands clenching. He drew on me first. I was faster. That's all. Sarah stared at him. Your mother. He destroyed her, used her up, and threw her away like she was nothing, and then he laughed about it. Ezra's eyes were distant. I don't regret killing him. I'd do it again. But I know how it looks. A half-breed killing a white businessman. No witnesses. Crawford's family screaming for blood. He shook his head. I ran because I had no choice. Started over. Built this place from nothing. Thought I'd finally buried the past. Harlan's going to dig it all up. Harlan's going to try. Ezra's jaw set. But I've got friends too. People who know the truth about Crawford. People who were too scared to speak up back then, but might feel different now. And if that's not enough, then I'll face whatever comes. Ezra looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. But I want you to know whatever happens, you and the children are protected. I've made arrangements. Dutch knows what to do. The ranch will be yours free and clear. Nobody's going to put you back on an auction block. I promise you that. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Ezra. Don't. His voice was rough. Don't thank me. I'm the one who put you in danger. If I'd known Harlan would dig this deep, I never would have. You saved us. Sarah stepped closer, close enough to see the pain in his gray eyes. You saved my children. Whatever happens, I won't forget that. I won't let them forget it. For a moment, something flickered between them. Something raw and real and terrifying. Then Ezra stepped back, breaking the connection. Storm's letting up, he said, his voice returning to its usual gruffness. I need to talk to Dutch, make plans. You should get back to the house, check on the children. Ezra. Go, Sarah, please. She went. The next 2 days were a blur of tension and preparation. Ezra sent riders out despite the lingering snow messages to old friends, people who might be willing to testify about Silas Crawford's true nature. Dutch fortified the ranch, checking weapons, making sure everyone knew what to do if trouble came. And Sarah waited. She tried to maintain normalcy for the children, but Will sensed something was wrong. He watched her with those 2 old eyes, asking questions she couldn't answer. Is Mr. Callahan in trouble? I don't know, baby. Maybe. Because of us. Because he saved us. No. Sarah pulled her son close. Because of something that happened a long time ago. Something that has nothing to do with us. But that man Harlan, he's coming back, isn't he? Sarah couldn't lie to him. Yes, I think he is. Then we have to help. Will's jaw set in that stubborn way she knew so well. Mr. Callahan saved us. We have to help him. How? I don't know. But there has to be something. There has to be. On the morning of the third day, Will disappeared. Sarah discovered his empty bed at dawn and felt her heart stop. She searched the cabin, then the main house, then the barn. No sign of him. No note. Nothing. When did you last see him? Ezra's voice was tight with controlled fear. Last night. He went to bed like always. I checked on him before I fell asleep, and he was there. Sarah's voice broke. Ezra, where could he have gone? It's freezing outside. If he's out in the snow. We'll find him. Ezra was already moving, grabbing his coat, calling for Dutch. He can't have gone far. The snow's too deep for a boy on foot. But the tracks they found told a different story. Small boot prints leading away from the cabin toward the main road, toward town. He's going after Harlan. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Oh God. Ezra, he's going after Harlan. Why would he do that? Because he thinks he can help. He thinks... Sarah choked on a sob. He's 8 years old. He thinks he can fix this. He thinks he can protect us. Ezra's face went pale. I'm going after him. I'm coming with you. No, you need to stay with Abby and Sammy. They need their mother. Ezra grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Sarah, listen to me. I will bring your son back. I swear it on my mother's grave. But I need you to stay here and keep the others safe. Can you do that? Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to fight, wanted to tear off into the snow and find her baby herself. But she looked at Abby and Sammy huddled together by the fire with terror in their eyes, and she knew Ezra was right. Bring him back, she whispered. Please, bring my son back. I will. Ezra's hands tightened on her shoulders. I will. Then he was gone, riding out into the frozen morning, and Sarah was left with nothing but fear and prayer, and the desperate hope that she hadn't lost another person she loved. The hours crawled by like years. Sarah paced the cabin, unable to eat, unable to rest, watching the window for any sign of returning riders. Abby cried herself to sleep in Sarah's arms. Sammy sat silent and still clutching his wooden horse, his dark eyes fixed on the door. Mama? Sammy's voice was barely a whisper. We're coming back. Yes, baby. Sarah's voice cracked. Will is coming back. But with every hour that passed, her certainty faded. The snow was deep. The cold was deadly. An 8-year-old boy alone in the wilderness, trying to reach a town 3 hours away. She couldn't think about it, couldn't let herself imagine the worst. So she prayed. For the first time in months, she actually prayed. Please, please bring them back, both of them, please. The sun was setting, painting the snow orange and gold when she heard hoofbeats. Sarah ran to the door, her heart in her throat, and saw 2 figures approaching through the dying light. Ezra on his big gray horse. And in front of him, wrapped in a blanket, was Will. Thank God. The words came out as a sob. Thank God. Thank God. Ezra pulled up in front of the cabin and carefully lowered Will into Sarah's arms. The boy was shivering, his lips blue with cold, but he was alive. He was alive. Mama? Will's voice was weak, exhausted. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought... Don't talk. Sarah crushed him against her, tears streaming down her face. Don't talk. Just let me hold you. She carried him inside, past Abby, who was crying with relief, past Sammy, who immediately climbed into his brother's lap. She stripped off his wet clothes, wrapped him in warm blankets, fed him hot broth, and didn't let go of his hand for a single second. Later, after the children were finally asleep, all 3 of them in one bed tangled together like they'd never let go. Ezra told her what happened. Found him about halfway to town. He'd made it farther than I expected, tough kid, your boy. But the cold got to him. He was stumbling when I caught up. Another hour and... Ezra stopped, his jaw tightening. What was he thinking? What was he trying to do? He had a plan. Ezra's voice was quiet. A crazy, stupid, brave plan. He was going to find the marshal before Harlan did. Tell him the truth about Crawford. About what kind of man he really was. He's 8 years old. Who would listen to an 8-year-old? That's what I said. Ezra met her eyes. He told me it didn't matter. Said even if nobody listened, at least he tried. Said a man... His voice caught. Said a man protects his family, no matter what. Sarah closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. That was Thomas's phrase. Something he'd said 1,000 times back when she still believed him. Back when she still thought words meant something. Will had remembered. Had twisted those empty words into something real. Something powerful. He could have died, Sarah whispered. My baby could have died. But he didn't. Ezra's hand covered hers, warm and rough. He didn't, Sarah. He's safe. They're all safe. For now. Sarah looked up at him, fear and exhaustion warring in her eyes. But Harlan's still out there. The marshal is still coming. And I don't know how to protect them from that. I don't know how to fight something this big. You're not fighting alone. Ezra's grip tightened. You've got me. You've got Dutch. You've got this whole ranch full of people who'd lay down their lives for those kids. He paused, something shifting in his expression. You've got a family now, Sarah. Whether you wanted one or not. A family. The word echoed in Sarah's mind, strange and foreign and achingly beautiful. She'd had a family once. Thomas and the children before everything fell apart. But that family had been built on lies, on promises that crumbled like sand. This was different. This was real. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we wait. Ezra's voice was steady. My friends are coming. People who knew Crawford. People who can testify to what he really was. When the marshal arrives, we'll be ready. And if it's not enough, then we fight. Ezra's eyes met hers, gray and fierce and utterly determined. We fight until there's nothing left to fight with. And then we fight some more. Sarah looked at this man, this rough, scarred, broken man who'd saved her family, who'd ridden into a blizzard to rescue her son, who was facing the ghosts of his past to protect people he barely knew, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd thought was dead forever. Ezra. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know how to thank you for... Don't. He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. Don't thank me. Not yet. Not until this is over. But as he walked to the door, he paused, looking back at her one last time. Get some rest, Sarah. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Then he was gone, and Sarah was left alone with her sleeping children and the terrifying, wonderful, impossible feeling growing in her heart. The marshal arrived 4 days later. Sarah saw the riders approaching from the kitchen window, 6 men on horseback cutting through the fresh snow like a blade. Her hands froze over the bread dough she'd been kneading, and her heart dropped into her stomach. They're here. She called, her voice steadier than she felt. Ezra, they're here. Ezra emerged from the back room, where he'd been talking with Dutch. His face was calm, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand drifted unconsciously toward his hip. Stay inside with the children, he said. No matter what happens, stay inside. Ezra, promise me, Sarah. She nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in her throat. Ezra held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he turned and walked out the front door, Dutch falling into step beside him. Sarah gathered the children in the main room, away from the windows. Will's face was pale but determined. He hadn't forgiven himself for running off, and Sarah could see the guilt eating at him. This is my fault, he whispered. If I hadn't tried to go to town. This is Harlan's fault. Sarah pulled him close. Not yours. Never yours. Through the window, she watched the riders dismount. The man in front was tall and broad, with a silver star pinned to his coat. Marshal Thomas Garrett. She'd heard the name mentioned over the past few days, always in worried tones. Victor Harlan was with them, of course. He hung back, watching with that smug smile that made Sarah want to claw his eyes out. Ezra Callahan. The marshal's voice carried across the yard. That's me. I'm Marshal Thomas Garrett. I'm here to ask you some questions about the death of Silas Crawford in Redemption, Kansas. 10 years ago. I figured as much. Ezra's voice was calm. Ask your questions. Did you kill Silas Crawford? A long pause. Sarah held her breath. Yes, Ezra said. I did. Harlan's smile widened. Several of his men exchanged glances. Then I'm placing you under arrest for murder. The marshal stepped forward, reaching for Ezra's arm. You'll come with us to stand trial. Hold on. Dutch moved between them, his weathered face hard. You're arresting a man on whose word Victor Harlan's... You know what kind of snake he is, Marshal. Everyone in the territory knows. I know he brought me evidence. Garrett's voice was cold. Witnesses, documents, more than enough to warrant an arrest. Bought witnesses, you mean? Forged documents. Dutch spat in the snow. Crawford was a monster. Ask anyone who really knew him. Ask the women he used up and threw away. Ask the families he destroyed. I'm not here to retry a dead man's character. Garrett reached for Ezra again. I'm here to bring in his killer. Then bring me in. Ezra's voice was quiet but firm. But know this, Marshal, I shot Silas Crawford in self-defense. He drew on me first. And if you dig deep enough, you'll find plenty of people who'll tell you what he really was. We'll see about that. The marshal's men moved forward, and Sarah felt her heart crack. This was it. They were taking him away, taking the man who'd saved her family, who'd given them everything, who'd become... What? What had he become? She didn't have time to answer that question before a new voice cut through the tension. Wait. Everyone turned. A woman was approaching from the road riding a tired-looking horse. She was older, maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair and a face lined by hard years. But her eyes were sharp, and she sat her horse like someone who'd been doing it all her life. Who the hell are you? Harlan demanded. My name is Martha Crawford. The woman dismounted her boots, crunching in the snow. Silas Crawford was my husband. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Harlan recovered first. Mrs. Crawford, what are you doing here? I thought. You thought I'd stay in Kansas and let you use my husband's death to destroy another innocent man. Martha's voice cracked like a whip. You thought wrong, Mr. Harlan. I don't understand. Marshal Garrett looked between Martha and Harlan. You told me Mrs. Crawford wanted justice, that she supported this arrest. He lied. Martha moved to stand beside Ezra, her chin high. Just like he's been lying about everything else. This is ridiculous, Harlan sputtered. She's clearly been paid off. Or threatened. Marshal, you can't possibly believe. I can speak for myself. Martha's eyes flashed. And I'm telling you right here, right now, that Ezra Callahan did the world a favor when he killed my husband. The words hung in the frozen air like smoke. Silas Crawford was a monster. Martha continued, her voice shaking with old pain. He beat me. He used me. He bought and sold people like livestock. He took that boy's mother and worked her to death, and when I tried to stop him, he broke 3 of my ribs. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She looked at Ezra, saw the shock on his face, and realized he hadn't known. Hadn't known that his mother wasn't the only one Crawford had destroyed. The night Silas died, he was drunk and mean, looking for a fight. That young man. Martha gestured to Ezra, walked into the saloon and told Silas who he was, told him what he'd done. And Silas laughed and drew his gun. Her voice broke. I was there, Marshal. I saw the whole thing, Silas drew first. Ezra just finished it. You're lying. Harlan's face was purple with rage. You were never mentioned in any of the reports. If you'd witnessed. I was too scared to speak up then. Martha's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Silas's family had money, power. They would have destroyed me. So I stayed quiet and let them call it murder and watched that boy run for his life. She turned to Ezra. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Your mother deserved better. You deserved better. Ezra's throat worked. You knew my mother. I knew her. Martha's voice softened. She was kind to me when no one else was. She used to sing while she worked old songs, beautiful songs. I've never forgotten them. A tear slid down her weathered cheek. I've never forgotten her. Sarah watched Ezra's face crack, watched the walls he'd built over 30 years start to crumble. He'd spent his whole life believing no one cared, believing his mother had died alone and forgotten. And here was this woman, this stranger carrying pieces of his mother's memory like precious gems. Marshal! Dutch stepped forward, his voice gruff. I've got 6 more people ready to testify about Crawford. Ranch hands who worked for him. Women he hurt. Men he cheated. They're all here waiting. You want the truth about Silas Crawford? We'll give you enough truth to fill a book. Garrett looked at his men, then at Harlan, then at the growing crowd of witnesses emerging from the bunkhouse and the barn. His expression shifted, hardened. Mr. Harlan. The marshal's voice was cold. It seems you may have misrepresented some facts. This is absurd. These people are obviously in collusion. They're lying to protect a murderer. A murderer you tried to frame. Garrett turned to face Harlan fully. You told me you had solid evidence, reliable witnesses. What you gave me was bought testimony and forged documents. I gave you the truth. You gave me what you wanted me to believe. Garrett pulled the papers from his coat, the same papers Harlan had waved so triumphantly just days ago, and tore them in half. I don't take kindly to being manipulated, Mr. Harlan, and I take even less kindly to men who use the law as a weapon against innocent people. Harlan's face went from purple to white. You can't do this. I'll have your badge. I have connections in Denver. Your connections don't impress me. Garrett gestured to his men. Take Mr. Harlan into custody. We'll be having a long conversation about filing false reports and wasting territorial resources. What? Harlan stumbled backward. You can't arrest me. I'm Victor Harlan. I own half this territory. You don't own the law. Garrett's voice was ice. Take him. 2 of the marshal's men moved forward and Harlan's composure finally shattered. He lunged for his horse, scrambling for escape, but Dutch was faster. The old foreman caught him by the collar and yanked him back, sending him sprawling in the snow. Going somewhere. Dutch's voice was mild, but his eyes were hard. You'll regret this. Harlan was screaming now, all pretense of sophistication gone. All of you, I'll destroy you. I'll burn this ranch to the ground. You'll shut your mouth and come quietly, Garrett interrupted, or I'll add resisting arrest to your charges. Your choice. Harlan went quiet, but his eyes fixed on Ezra, on Sarah, on the children watching from the window, burned with a hatred that made Sarah's blood run cold. This isn't over. Those eyes promised. This will never be over. Then the marshal's men hauled him to his feet, bound his hands, and led him away. Sarah stood at the window, watching until the riders disappeared over the hill. She didn't realize she was crying until Abby tugged at her sleeve. Mama, why are you crying? The bad man is gone. I know, sweet girl. Sarah wiped her eyes. These are happy tears. Happy tears are silly. Maybe, but sometimes they're all we have. The door opened and Ezra stepped inside. He looked shaken, years of buried pain written across his face. But when his eyes found Sarah, something else flickered there. Something warm, something hopeful. It's over, he said quietly. Harlan's going to prison. The charges against me are dropped. It's finally over. Is it? Sarah moved toward him, stopping just a few feet away. Or is this just the beginning? Ezra's breath caught. Sarah, you saved my family. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. You saved my son when he ran off into the snow. You stood up to Harlan when everyone else was too scared. You've given us a home, a future, everything we thought we'd lost. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. That's what makes it matter. Sarah reached up and touched his face gently, tentatively, feeling the rough stubble beneath her fingers. I was so scared to trust anyone again. After Thomas, after everything he put us through, I thought I'd never be able to open my heart. But you. I'm not a good man, Sarah. Ezra's voice was rough. I've done things. Killed a man. Lived with rage and bitterness for half my life. You deserve better than, don't tell me what I deserve. Sarah's voice sharpened. I've spent my whole life being told what I deserve. By my father. By Thomas. By every man who thought he knew what was best for me. I'm done with that. Ezra stared at her, speechless. What I want, Sarah continued, softer now, is a man who keeps his promises. A man who protects children instead of hurting them. A man who rides into blizzards to save people he barely knows. She stepped closer. I want you, Ezra Callahan, if you'll have me. For a long moment, Ezra didn't move. Didn't breathe. His eyes searched her face like he was looking for the trick, the trap, the moment when everything would fall apart. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't polite. It was fierce and desperate and full of everything they'd both been holding back. All the fear, all the longing, all the hope they'd been too scared to name. Ew! Abby's voice cut through the moment. Mama, why are you kissing Mr. Callahan? Sarah pulled back, laughing and crying at the same time. Because I like him, sweet girl. Like him, the way people in stories like each other. Yes. Sarah looked at Ezra, saw the wonder in his eyes and felt her heart swell. Exactly like that. Will stood in the corner watching with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. She braced herself for anger, for jealousy, for the fierce protectiveness that had driven him into the snow. But instead, Will walked slowly forward and stopped in front of Ezra. Are you going to marry my mama? Ezra looked at Sarah, then back at Will. I'd like to. If she'll have me, and if you'll let me. Let you. You're the man of this family, Will. You've been protecting your mother and your brother and sister since before you came here. I'm not looking to replace your father. I'm not looking to take over. But I'd like to be part of this family if you'll allow it. Will was quiet for a long time. Sarah held her breath, watching her son process this new reality. Finally, Will spoke. My papa made a lot of promises. He broke all of them. I know. If you hurt my mama, I'll kill you. Will, Sarah gasped. But Ezra just nodded, his expression serious. Fair enough. If I hurt your mama, I'll deserve it. Will studied him for another moment. Then slowly, he held out his hand. Okay, he said. You can marry her. Ezra shook the offered hand solemnly, man to man. Thank you, Will. I won't let you down. That night, after the children were asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, Sarah and Ezra sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars wheel overhead. I never thought I'd have this, Ezra said quietly. A family. A home that felt like home. People who actually wanted me around. I never thought I'd trust again. Sarah leaned into his warmth. Never thought I'd be able to look at a man without seeing Thomas, without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Are you still waiting? Sarah considered the question. No, she said finally. I don't think I am. Good. Ezra pressed a kiss to her hair. Because I'm not going anywhere. Not ever. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind whisper across the snow. We should probably talk about the wedding, Sarah said eventually. If we're actually doing this. We're doing this. Ezra's voice was firm. Soon as the weather breaks. I'm not waiting any longer than I have to. People will talk. A widow remarrying so fast. Let them talk. Ezra tightened his arm around her. I spent 30 years worrying about what people thought, hiding who I was, running from my past. I'm done with that. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Whitmore. I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to keep tongues from wagging. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again, happy tears, Abby would say, and turned to face him. I love you, she said. I didn't think I'd ever say that to anyone again, but I love you, Ezra Callahan. I love you too. His voice was rough with emotion. You and those children. You're my family now, my whole world. He kissed her again, soft and sweet this time, and Sarah felt the last of her walls crumble away. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if Harlan would find a way to cause more trouble or if the ghosts of the past would rise again. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore, and whatever came next, they would face it together. The wedding came 3 weeks later, on a morning so bright and clear, it seemed like the whole world had been scrubbed clean just for them. Sarah stood in the cabin staring at her reflection in the small mirror Dutch had brought over from the main house. The dress was simple blue cotton, nothing fancy, but it was new. The first new dress she'd owned in years. Ezra had ridden to town himself to buy it, coming back with fabric and thread, and a fierce determination that she would have something beautiful for their wedding day. Mama, Abby tugged at her sleeve. You look like a princess. Do I? Sarah smiled, though her hands were shaking. I feel more like a nervous wreck. What's a nervous wreck? Someone who's very happy and very scared at the same time. Abby considered this. That's silly. If you're happy, why would you be scared? Sarah knelt down to look her daughter in the eyes. Because sometimes the good things feel even more fragile than the bad things. When you've lost a lot, you start to worry that you'll lose more. But Mr. Callahan won't leave us. Abby's voice was certain. He promised. And he keeps his promises. That's what Will says. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Will said that. He says Mr. Callahan is different from Papa. He says Mr. Callahan means what he says. Abby tilted her head. Is that true, Mama? Yes, baby. Sarah pulled her daughter close. That's true. A knock at the door made them both jump. Sarah opened it to find Dutch standing on the porch, his weathered face split in a grin. They're ready for you, he said. Ezra's about to wear a hole in the ground from all his pacing. He's nervous. Nervous, don't cover it. Man's been checking his watch every 30 seconds for the past hour. Think he's scared you might change your mind. Sarah laughed, a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside. Tell him I'm coming, and tell him to stop pacing. The ceremony took place in front of the main house under an arbor that the ranch hands had built from pine branches and winter berries. The whole ranch had gathered Dutch the hands, even Martha Crawford, who had decided to stay on for a while, helping where she could. And there, standing at the center of it all, was Ezra. He'd cleaned up for the occasion, shaved, combed his hair, put on a suit that looked like it hadn't been worn in a decade. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's breath catch. Those gray-blue eyes that had seen so much pain, so much loss, were shining now with something she'd never seen in them before. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope. Will walked Sarah down the makeshift aisle, his small hand steady in hers. Abby followed behind, scattering dried flower petals she'd been saving since the fall. And Sammy, sweet, silent. Sammy rode on Dutch's shoulders, clutching his wooden horse, and watching everything with wide, wondering eyes. The pastor from town spoke the words, ancient words about love and commitment and building a life together. Sarah barely heard them. She was too busy looking at Ezra, too busy trying to memorize every line of his face, every expression that flickered across his features. Do you, Ezra Josiah Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation, no doubt. Just 2 words spoken with the weight of a vow. And do you, Sarah Ellen Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Sarah thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The auction block, the terror, the stranger who'd appeared from nowhere and changed everything. The man who'd saved her children, who'd fought for them, who'd opened his heart to a broken family and made them whole. "I do," she said. "I absolutely do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The pastor smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Ezra pulled her close and kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, the ranch hands whooped and cheered. Dutch wiped his eyes with his sleeve and pretended it was just the cold. And somewhere in the chaos, Sarah heard Abby's voice, clear as a bell. "Does this mean Mr. Callahan is our papa now?" Sarah pulled back from the kiss, looking down at her daughter. "What do you think, sweet girl?" Abby considered the question with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. Then she turned to Ezra, who had gone very still. "Can I call you Papa?" she asked. "Not to replace my old papa, but to have a new one. Mama says families can grow. She says we can have new people without losing the old ones." Ezra knelt down in the snow, bringing himself to Abby's eye level. His voice was rough when he spoke. "I'd be honored, Abby. More honored than you know." Abby threw her arms around his neck, and Sarah saw Ezra's eyes close, saw the tears he was trying to hide. This man, this rough, scarred, broken man, had spent 30 years believing he didn't deserve a family. And now, here he was, with a little girl's arms around his neck, and a love so big it seemed to fill the whole sky. "Will?" Ezra looked at the older boy who was hanging back watching. "I know you said I could marry your mama. But I want you to know, I'm not looking to replace your father. Whatever you want to call me, whatever role you want me to have, that's your choice. I'll never push." Will was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked forward, his face unreadable. "My papa was a drunk and a liar," Will said, his voice steady. "He made promises he couldn't keep. He hurt my mama. He hurt all of us." He paused, his jaw tightening. "You're not like him. You're nothing like him." "I'm trying not to be." "I know." Will took a breath. "I can't call you Papa, not yet. Maybe not ever. But—" He hesitated. "Maybe I could call you something else. Something that's just ours." Ezra nodded slowly. "What did you have in mind?" "Ezra." Will said the name like he was testing it. "Just Ezra, like we're—" He stopped, struggling for words. "Like we're partners." Will's face lit up. "Yeah, like partners." Ezra held out his hand, and Will shook it man to man. "Partners it is." Sammy, who had been watching this exchange with great interest, suddenly squirmed out of Dutch's arms and toddled over to Ezra. He held up his wooden horse, the same horse he'd clutched through the auction, through the journey, through every terrifying moment of the past months. "Papa," he said, clearly placing the horse in Ezra's hands. "For you." The word hit like a thunderbolt. Ezra stared at the wooden horse, then at the small boy who'd given it to him. His hands were shaking. "Sammy." Sarah's voice was gentle. "That's your special horse. You don't have to—" "For Papa." Sammy's voice was firm. "He keep us safe. He get a horse too." Ezra gathered the boy into his arms, and Sarah saw something break in him, something hard and old and bitter, crumbling away to reveal the man underneath. The man who'd been waiting his whole life for a family. The man who'd finally found one. "Thank you," Ezra whispered into Sammy's hair. "Thank you, son." The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was food, more food than Sarah had seen in months, and music from a fiddle one of the ranch hands had produced, and dancing in the packed snow under a sky full of stars. Sarah danced with Ezra, then with Dutch, then with Will, who complained the whole time, but couldn't hide his smile. She watched Abby twirl in circles with Martha Crawford, watched Sammy clap his hands to the music from his perch on a hay bale, watched her family laughing and alive and whole. It was more than she'd ever dared to dream. Later, after the children were asleep in their cabin and the ranch hands had stumbled off to the bunkhouse, Sarah and Ezra stood together on the porch of the main house, looking out at the snow-covered world. "Mrs. Callahan." Ezra's voice was soft. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." Sarah leaned into his warmth. "Although I'm still getting used to it." "You've got the rest of your life to get used to it." The rest of her life. The words echoed in Sarah's mind, filling her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire inside. 3 months ago, she'd been standing on an auction block, certain she was about to lose everything. Her children, her freedom, her hope. Now she was standing on a porch with her husband's arm around her, watching the stars wheel overhead, and the future stretched out before her like a gift she'd never expected to receive. "Ezra." "Thank you." He pulled back to look at her. "For what?" "For seeing us. That day at the auction. Everyone else looked at us like we were property, like we were problems to be solved or opportunities to be exploited. But you—" Her voice caught. "You saw a family. You saw people who deserved to stay together." "I saw a mother who would fight to the death for her children." Ezra's voice was rough. "I saw a woman who'd been through hell and was still standing. That's what I saw, Sarah. That's what made me step forward. And now. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Now I see my wife, my family, my home." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Now I see everything I ever wanted and never thought I'd have." Sarah felt tears slide down her cheeks. Happy tears, always happy tears now, and pulled him into a kiss that said everything words couldn't. The months that followed were the happiest of Sarah's life. Spring came slowly to Colorado, melting the snow and turning the world green and gold. Abby's garden flourished under her devoted care, producing vegetables and flowers in abundance. Will grew taller and stronger, learning everything Dutch and Ezra could teach him about horses and ranching. And Sammy, no longer silent, chattered endlessly about everything and nothing, his wooden horse still clutched in his hand. Sarah transformed the main house into a home, a real home filled with warmth and laughter and the smell of fresh bread. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and long days, and bone-deep satisfaction of honest work. And every night, she fell asleep in Ezra's arms, safe and loved and whole. Victor Harlan went to prison for filing false reports and attempting to manipulate the law. His mines were shut down. His workers freed, his empire crumbling. Sarah heard the news and felt nothing but relief. That chapter was closed. Forever. Martha Crawford stayed on at the ranch, helping where she could, finding peace in the simple routine of daily life. She and Sarah became friends, bonded by shared pain and shared hope. And on quiet evenings, Martha would tell stories about Ezra's mother, the songs she used to sing, the kindness she'd shown, the strength she'd carried, even in the darkest times. Ezra listened to these stories with tears in his eyes, finally learning about the mother he'd lost so long ago, finally finding the closure he'd spent 30 years seeking. "She'd be proud of you," Martha told him one night. "If she could see what you've built here, the family you've made, she'd be so proud." "I hope so," Ezra said quietly. "I hope she knows I never forgot her." "She knows." Martha squeezed his hand. "Wherever she is, she knows." Summer came and went. Fall painted the mountains in red and gold. And before Sarah knew it, a full year had passed since that terrible day on the auction block. She stood at the window of the main house, watching her children play in the yard. Will was teaching Abby to rope badly, judging by the tangle of rope at her feet, while Sammy chased chickens in gleeful circles. Laughter echoed across the yard, bright and free and full of life. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back into Ezra's solid warmth. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured against her hair. "A year ago today," Sarah said softly, "I was standing on an auction block watching a stranger buy my family. And now I'm standing in my home watching my children play, feeling my husband's arms around me." She turned to face him. Now I'm happier than I ever thought possible." Ezra kissed her slow and deep. "I love you, Sarah Callahan. I love you and those children more than anything in this world." "I love you too." Sarah smiled up at him. "More than the sky. More than the stars. More than every breath I've ever taken." "That's a lot of love." "It's exactly the right amount." Outside, Abby had finally managed to rope something Dutch's hat, which she'd yanked clean off his head. The old foreman chased her around the yard while Will collapsed in laughter, and Sammy cheered from the sidelines. Sarah watched her family, her beautiful, imperfect, hard-won family, and felt her heart overflow. She'd been sold on an auction block in the dead of winter, certain she was losing everything. Instead, she'd found everything she'd ever wanted. A home. A future. A love that would last the rest of her days. And the cowboy who'd whispered 5 words that changed her life forever. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Sarah and Ezra sat together on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead. A year ago, she'd sat on this same porch, terrified and uncertain, barely daring to hope. Now she sat with her husband's hand in hers, her heart full to bursting, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Ezra." "Yes." "Tell me about our future." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Well," he said finally, "I see us right here, growing old together, watching those children grow up and have families of their own, sitting on this porch when we're gray and wrinkled, telling stories about the blizzard of '73 and the day I bought the most stubborn, beautiful woman I'd ever seen off an auction block." Sarah laughed. "Stubborn? The stubbornest." He grinned. "That's one of the things I love most about you." "What else do you see?" "I see Will running this ranch someday with a family of his own. I see Abby with the biggest garden in the territory feeding half of Colorado. I see Sammy." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "I see Sammy growing up strong and kind, never knowing what it feels like to be afraid." "That's a beautiful future." "It's our future." Ezra squeezed her hand. "Every single day of it. Together." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of pine and snow and home. She'd walked through fire to get here, through loss and grief and terror and despair. But she'd made it. They'd all made it. And now, finally, she understood. The darkest winters always gave way to spring. The deepest pain could transform into the greatest joy. And sometimes, when you'd lost everything, someone would step out of the storm and give you a reason to believe again. Sarah Ellen Callahan opened her eyes and looked at the stars, at the snow, at the home she'd built with the man she loved. She'd been sold with her children on the coldest day of her life, and a cowboy had whispered 5 words that changed everything. "I'll take the whole family." 5 words that meant salvation. 5 words that meant hope. 5 words that meant home. And that Sarah thought, as Ezra pulled her closer and pressed a kiss to her hair, was the greatest love story she'd ever known.